Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter 8, Driving Experimentation and Adoption. In this chapter, we're going to look at establishing a culture of experimentation with AI within your organization. And we're going to look at some practical ways to do that with things like AI hackathons and pilots that you can run. We're going to talk about the role of AI champions within your organization, and then we're going to look at your role as a change advocate for working with AI. Then we're going to wrap up this chapter by looking at some very practical resources you can use to get a fast start on establishing that culture of experimentation within your organization. So taking that first step is often the hardest. So let's explore some ways that you can support that culture of experimentation with AI. For me, it really starts with creating that psychological safety over the need for perfection. In my experience, people are not avoiding AI because they dislike it. They avoid it because of the fear of being wrong. And let's face it, in finance, in accounting, in treasury, there is a bias towards completeness and accuracy. So it's natural to feel that way. When it comes to working with AI, adoption's really going to happen when we create this safety and let people know that it's safe to try and that it's safe to fail. And we need to give this clear, explicit permission to experiment. And if we don't explicitly state that it's okay to try, we're going to fail. Silence is often interpreted as risk. So if our leaders are not getting out there and actively granting permission, you're not going to get your AI experimentation off the ground. More practically, I would recommend you start small with some low risk initiatives, but make sure that the results are visible. Early experiments should be intentionally scoped, leveraging internal data, looking for outputs that are in more of a draft format than a final version. And throughout this process, the human is absolutely going to be in the loop. And with the visibility into the successes and the failures, it's going to build confidence and momentum. We need to make it crystal clear that learning is the outcome, not success. An experiment that fails is still going to teach us something, and that is absolutely a win. And the framing of that matters. Otherwise, you can get off to a fast start, but people will stop experimenting. So now that we've gone ahead and established those ground rules, let's think about some of the practical steps to take. And as we're thinking about those, I want you to consider AI hackathons and pilots as a great way to do that. Why are they great? Well, they really frame these as time-bound experiments. They're great because they limit risk. They give you a defined start and end date to reduce hesitation and give focus to that experiment. If you don't create that focus, there will always be other distractions that take priority. When you're doing this, you'll want to use real data to attempt to solve real problems. Experiments only drive adoption when they're actually trying to solve real pain points. Test examples do not translate into usage at the end of the day, so make sure you're using real data. Bias toward action over debate. AI value is discovered through use, not discussion. So make sure that these pilots turn abstract ideas into concrete learning quickly. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't brainstorm or have those discussions or share those successes and those failures. But it does mean we want hands-on keyboards working with these AI tools to enhance experimentation and adoption. And then while we're doing all of this, we want to capture the outcomes and the learnings. We want to share what has worked, what didn't work, and what may have surprised us as we've been going down this path together. And if we don't capture this, if we don't document this, that experimentation doesn't compound. It becomes a one-off exercise, and then we forget about it as other priorities come up. So these really are great opportunities to explore your team's creativity as they dive into experimentation. And so speaking of creativity, I just wanted to call out a quote here from Satya Nadella, who is the CEO of Microsoft. And Satya said, "AI cannot replace human qualities like creativity, empathy, and judgment. Instead, AI is going to amplify our human capabilities and help cultivate our creative spirit." And I think, Satya really hits home here that through creativity and experimentation, we will be able to amplify our own capabilities. And so this is really just one of my favorite quotes that we'll share in this entire program, because it speaks to the heart of what we're trying to do, to educate and enable in the pursuit of creative outcomes. Those capitalizing on these opportunities might be referred to as AI champions. But what should we expect from those AI champions? Well, you may already have some people that you might consider AI champions, or someone that you think of when I mention the term AI champions. And whether you do or don't, here are some of the things that you'll want from those champions. You'll want them to drive adoption through peer groups. People trust their colleagues, certainly more than a top-down leadership announcement. Champions really normalize the usage through execution of everyday examples and sharing those results. They're able to translate the day-to-day, and they don't need to be the experts. Champions don't need to be these technical computer science wizards. What they do need to be successful is help translate AI solutions into how they can be used into the day-to-day workflows and language that our teams understand. They're going to lead local adoption. And that could mean local by location in a specific office or by team. Central teams enable, but adoption really only happens locally. So if you have your champions embedded in teams locally, it's going to create relevance for them. They are more likely to lean into that champion and start on their own path of experimentation and adoption. If it's really just a top-down push, they're much more unlikely to create that space for it. And make sure that your AI champions are promoting recognition to drive momentum. We want them to publicly recognize when people have experimented and had those successes and failures, because it's going to reinforce the behavior that you're looking for from your broader team. So we've covered some of the things that we're looking for from our AI champions, but what's your role in all of this? Let's go ahead and take a closer look. So I will say there is certainly some overlap here in terms of what is expected from your role as a change advocate and the role of AI champions. But there are a few things that I want you to remember. It's important that you're enabling others, not trying to build everything yourself. You don't have to deliver every AI solution, but it is important to help remove friction so that others can experiment safely. You want to translate risk into reassurance. Through advocacy, it often means helping leadership feel comfortable by explaining boundaries, trade-offs, and why experimentation is controlled and not chaotic. If you can give them that assurance that this is a risk worth taking and that the outcomes are going to be beneficial to your organization through success and failure, you're going to provide them that reassurance that we're doing the right thing. Make sure you focus on momentum and not mastery. You don't need perfect understanding to get started here, but that early momentum builds confidence faster than deep expertise. And the more that you can share that message with the team, the more they're going to lean into adoption and experimentation. And then ultimately just model the behavior that you want to see. When leaders and influencers openly experiment and share their own stories, It signals permission more loudly than any policy that could be pushed from the top down. Now we're going to review some of the resources that you can leverage to get a fast start on AI adoption in your organization. So what I want you to think about is creating your own AI experimentation ideas board. So what we can do is create a very simple framework for tracking ideas. And it's going to help our team kind of move from, AI sounds interesting through to here's what I'm going to try. We're going to use this to capture ideas, prioritize them, and track outcomes. And we talked about that earlier, that the importance of actually writing things down and calling out where we've had success and failure. And bottom line, just letting the team know they don't need better ideas. You'll find that people have some great ideas when it comes to experimentation with AI, but they just need a place to put them. So we have a very simple tracker here that you can leverage right out of the box, where we just have a number of columns where we can start capturing these data points. First and foremost, capture the idea. Even if it's raw and not fully baked, write it down. And then obviously confirm the problem that it solves. We just talked about the need to solve real world problems, not test scenarios with test data. Hold the team accountable to that. Speaking of accountability, making sure that someone is ultimately responsible for each experiment is critical. So make sure you're assigning ownership so that you can hold those team members accountable and motivate them to really tackle this problem. Give them a target date to work towards to make sure that we're seeing progress. Make sure the date's reasonable, but before, locking that down, make sure you get that commitment from that owner, and they're much more likely to drive towards that date once they've made that commitment. We touched on this earlier, the need to prioritize smaller, low-risk experiments. That doesn't mean we shouldn't capture ideas for perhaps higher risk ideas and higher risk experiments. But in terms of what we tackle first, we should be leaning into those lower risk experiments. And then for this to be, not a one-off exercise, but a living, breathing tracker, make sure we're tracking the status and the outcomes here. And again, that includes successes and failures. And it's going to make it very easy for you to share those wins with the broader organization when you have everything tracked in one place. So really make sure, I can't stress enough, that you're celebrating those wins. Now we're going to look at a way that you can actually do that. One way to do that is to host your own AI success interviews. And what you can do is turn early wins and failures into adoption accelerators by interviewing those early adopters. Have them share their stories over a number of different, mediums. It could be a live interview, but it could also be an email, a lunch and learn, or even a live demonstration if that's something that they're comfortable doing. You can use this as an opportunity to normalize the learning and iteration that comes with that. And don't forget that these stories drive adoption way faster than dashboards that management is putting together or pushes top down. So some of the questions you can think about as you are interviewing folks that have had success with AI. You can ask them, what was the original problem that they were trying to solve? And how did they try and solve this? What was their starting point? A question I like is what surprised them? You often get some great creative answers there. You really want to understand what worked for them and what didn't. That's a great learning opportunity for everyone. And then as they reflect, what would they do differently next time? Or what are they trying next? And then, kind of the more obvious question, just what advice would they give to the broader team as they think about experimenting with AI? So now that we have some practical resources to really jump in and drive experimentation, where do we start? I'll say this, there's really no time like the present. So I've put together a very high level, kind of 30-day AI starter plan to give your team a concrete starting point. Now you can break this up in whatever way makes sense for you and your team. Whether that's week by week, I've broken it up here in terms of 10-day stretches. Let's just keep it simple. And remember that momentum here matters way more than perfection. So please get started today. I just want to cover the quick sample structure here just so you get an idea of how this could be framed. And to kick this off with the first 10 days, working with the team to identify, 3, 4, 5 low risk use cases. And then really set the foundation for guardrails for this experimentation to keep it, coming back to that AI hackathon approach, keep it time bound, keep it focused, and set those guardrails early so everyone knows kind of the framing that they're working within, such as working with actual data to solve real problems. And we already talked about assigning owners to each of those initiatives. In the next 10 days, really push for driving the pilot and the hackathon and capture the learnings along the way, not just the outcomes. And then as you get to the end of the month, those final 10 days, you want to have a plan for sharing the success stories. And then for each of those initiatives that you've identified, make a conscious decision. Are we going to stop here? Maybe the experiment failed, but we learned something from it. Did it go really well and this is something that we want to scale? Or is this something that we want to spend a bit more time with and iterate on? Then, to kind of bring this full circle, we want to think about how do we refresh our backlog. Perhaps that's another kind of brainstorming conversation to add more ideas to the list. And new ideas will actually, you'll find come from experimentation in those first 20 days. So be sure to get a fast start now. Okay, we've covered a lot in Chapter 8, and we've been focused on the importance of experimentation and practical ways you can drive AI adoption within your organization. We looked at the role of AI champions, as well as your role as a change advocate. We acknowledge that there is some overlap between the two, but real emphasis on the importance of enabling others and not trying to build everything on your own. The drive toward momentum over perfection is going to be critical to your success. And then from the practical side of this chapter, we looked at 3 simple tools that you can leverage right away to get your AI program off the ground. It all starts with tracking those ideas. And you'll find that people have an abundance of ideas, but they're stuck in their head and not written down somewhere central. Be sure to celebrate and share wins, and a great way to do that is by running a quick interview with those early adopters and help them share their story and learnings along the way. That includes their successes and their failures. And don't wait to get started. Take that very simple 30-day starter plan and jump right in to get a fast start on AI adoption. In the next chapter, we're going to cover just other considerations when working with AI. We're going to talk about using AI responsibly. We're going to lean into data privacy and security. Obviously, that's paramount with any technology, perhaps even more so when working with AI first technology. The fact that AI should be used to supplement our analytical thinking and not replace it. And then a really fun piece of this is going to be looking at what the future holds. Really some practical pieces that we expect to happen in the next 12 to 24 months. And, a few predictions that I have in mind for the longer term. With that, congratulations. You have successfully completed this module. And I will see you in the next chapter. Thank you very much.